Okay, chapter 20, part 2. We finished off by talking about some of the new responsibilities in the industrial era. One responsibility of the state that didn't change is going to war. But industrialization changed the nature of warfare, and as a result, it also changed state power. And by the end of the 19th century, we have a situation where much of Europe was antagonistically militarized. They were really poised to go to war, which exploded eventually into World War I in 1914, which we're seeing the 100th anniversary of this year. We'll talk more about the development of World War I in the coming weeks. What also changed in this period was that industrialization brought about mass politics. Politics also, in some ways, became a commodity in itself, and something that individuals or groups could buy into. Urbanization, which went along with industrialization, saw concentration of a mass of workers, and this gave them political weight, even if they did not yet have the vote. In the beginning, the middle class were unhappy about the continuance of elite privileges, although some of the middle class had the vote, men, we're talking about a period before even all men had the vote. Universal suffrage means white male, so all the votes for all white men. So not all men had the vote, but increasingly more and more middle class had the vote. But this didn't necessarily give them the same kind of privileges and powers that the elite had. And so we see a period of political uprisings in 1830, France has another revolution. It's only 40 years, remember, since the French Revolution in 1830. Sorry, did I make that clear? So France has another revolution in 1830, which is only 40 years since the French Revolution of 1789. So that was a little bit confusing. And then in 1848, there's a whole series of revolutions all across Europe, except notably in England. Ironically, the outcome is not in favour of working men. It actually results in a more conservative trend because the middle class realises at the end they're a little bit more afraid of the workers than they are resentful of the elite. And the middle class reacts to some concessions that the elite give them by siding with the elite against, or the very rich, against the workers. Regardless, moves for social reform and moves for expanding the vote continue, and eventually the vote is extended to all white men, and which is what we mean by universal suffrage. And then eventually people campaign to extend the vote to other groups in society, such as women, which is what these people are campaigning for here. Even without the issue of voting, people are still very concerned about social reforms, and many people are working for social reforms such as the abolition of slavery or against child labour. And ironically, many of these ideas were pioneered by women, not women like these that are introduced in want to incorporate women into the public sphere, but by women who think that moral issues such as the welfare of children or abolition belong in the domestic sphere and can be talked about as moral concerns and not political concerns. Okay, so we're also looking in this period at the slow spread of democracy, and we talked about the abolition of the great cultural divide between rich and between the written culture of the elites and the non-written culture of the commoners. In this period, we get industrialized products such as the phonograph, which really take away the great cultural divide altogether, because even literacy is not an impediment to participating in mass culture at this stage. So what is mass culture concerned about? Well, when we end the great cultural divide, people start to become much more interested in different political ideologies, all kinds of ideologies actually. And we see this period that we describe as the explosion of isms, self-conscious ideologies. This is really brought about by mass access to the cultural screen images and heightened competition for space on the screen. The cultural frames are also very stretched, and in light of this ideological competition, we get this rash of self-conscious isms in the 19th century. Isms that are believed in wholeheartedly by ists, if we use that suffix as well, communists, feminists, racists, nationalists, etc. So how does the state react to these rash of isms? Well, they react by co-opting it. So cohesive coercion, or how to coerce people into maintaining the cohesion of a state, gets more and more difficult with more and more access to mass media. And we're looking here at Austria, okay, which is a much bigger country in the 19th century. Now, all these different colors, this is the whole of Austria, okay, all the way around here is the whole of Austria. And what we're looking at with the different colors are different ethnic groups within Austria. So how do you keep this together in the light of mass media and mass society and people deciding on these different political isms? Well, one of the ways that's developed to do this is the development of nationalism and nationalists. A nation is a construct. Many people don't realize this. So a nation is only a nation because people say it's a nation. They believe it's a nation. It's a cultural construct. It's a group of people that believe they are a nation. Another group of people may believe they're not a nation. And this also happens. So you have groups in the world nowadays who believe they are a nation even though they have no nation status, such as the Kurds, for instance. So nationalism is the self-conscious promotion of this national identity, this construct. It sounds quite benign, but nationalism is a long way from a little flag waving at a parade, even though flag waving and parades are certainly part of nationalism. And when you read Tracey, this one of the sources for this week, you realize that nationalism really is quite an evil thing, or it can be, and taken to its natural conclusions. So when people start defining their nation, their national characteristics, what's special about being German, for instance, you start to say, well, we're German because we're this, and we're German because we're special. And then another part of this is discerning what people within Germany are not really German, such as the Jews, even though the Jews may have lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years. So another part of this is defining how their nation is different and therefore better than other nations. And this gives you the idea that competition between nations is quite right and quite healthy. Not really the case, but also dangerously the idea that in a competition between nations, because of your nationalistic belief, you believe you're going to win. And this is what happens in World War I. All the combatants that entered World War I thought they were going to win because they'd been so hoodwinked by nationalism into believing, each and every one of them, that their country was the best, okay? when you start to buy into a nationalistic ideology, you also believe, because your nation is better than everybody else's, it's a good idea to take over other nations and give them the benefit of your national culture. Hence we get imperialism, this idea that taking over other countries in Asia and Africa is for their own good, because you can bring them the benefits of the French nation or the English nation, for example. And so we talked a little bit about competition between nations under these conditions, under the conditions of competition between different European nations, which have now done this massive land grab and got big imperial colonies as well. And we're looking at the conditions for World War One. And the question, was World War I inevitable under these nationalistic conditions, is a real question. Okay, we also have a whole slew of other isms in this period, political isms, the labeling of different political tendencies in a way that kind of closes them off from the issues. So rather than having an issue and weighing the different sides of it, people are almost forced by these ideologies. Okay, the ideology feels this, so you have to go along with it because you support that ideology, regardless of what you may or may not feel about different issues. And one of the things about these political ideologies is that they can shift meaning quite profoundly. And we'll take the idea of liberalism. So a liberal today in America, not in the UK, where there's a Liberal Party, which is nothing like how the word liberal is used in America. In America, some people actually use liberal as almost a dirty word, as something that's derogatory. Those who want the government to protect the most vulnerable members of society are often called bleeding heart liberals, for example. But liberals didn't start out with this sort of idea of protecting the weakest members of society. Liberals started out as proponents of the laissez-faire system, which thought laissez-faire means, in French, leave it alone, don't touch it, don't interfere. So laissez-faire politics means that the government shouldn't interfere to protect those that are most vulnerable, even if they're threatened by death or very, very dire conditions. So the word liberal, taken from its French origins and taking a little path over 150, 200 years, has completely changed its meaning when it reaches modern America. But it's still so one of these ideologies that's so divisive that, if you're this, you believe this, and stick with those views no matter how you feel on individual issues. So this is the nature of isms. And what you're looking at here are cultural screen images of different types of cultural isms. Romanticism we talked a little bit about. We're going to be reading a little bit of Wordsworth. But also the idea that cultural trends and artistic trends can be expressed in as different isms as well. Okay, so not only cultural trends, artistic trends, also religions start to be expressed as isms, Buddhism, Judaism, etc. The only one that doesn't get labeled an ism, as in an ideology or a belief, is Christianity. And you've got to think about who controls the English language and who's doing the labelism. Christianity never becomes Christianism because, the rich white Western Europeans, Americans that are labeling things isms, see it as the sort of normal way of being and therefore not a distinct ideology or belief. And then what we're looking at here at the end is a cartoon of Charles Darwin. Darwin's belief in evolution is being mocked a little bit here. And the chapter ends with a warning against how isms can be perverted. Charles Darwin argued about the survival of the fittest in the long-term evolution of different species. Social Darwinists tried to apply his theory to human societies and argued that the fittest humans survive, and ergo it's okay if the least fit don't survive because it'd be better for humanity as a whole, which is really quite a vile idea, which Darwin himself was horrified by. Okay, that's it.